So it's just an inspirational thing. I've been on the WOW website now, I guess, for about 8 years now, I guess, something like that. And Calabash forms have been kind of the domain of a few turners living in Hawaii for a good reason, and you'll see why. And it's something I sort of stumbled on and thought, yeah, that's a pretty neat shape, and did a few and got bored like I always do and moved on. The world's worst turner when it comes back to doing stuff over and over again. I just can't do it. And last year I went back to them, so this is what you're going to see tonight. So I'm going to pass this around anyway, so you can all take a look at it. Give you something to look at besides me. You want to take it and pass it on? Okay, let's get off the titles. Not that one.
Down.
That more or less tells you exactly what I've just told you. I've got a cheat sheet here so I can keep up with what I'm doing. In the poorer parts of the world, they cut these things off the tree and dry them and then use them as cooking pots and storage containers and stuff. So it's been going on for thousands of years. It's not something new. In Hawaii, I don't know how long ago, a long time ago, some of the native skilled people started to carve them using stone and coral tools, and they carved them from a tree that was pretty prevalent on the islands, and these were really ritualistic bowls that were used in special occasions, and like it says there, only the kings had the wooden ones. All of the peasants had the gourds straight off the tree that they used at home. But they become a real status symbol in Hawaiian society. And there's some blurb, I don't know if you can read this, if not I'll go through it. Lathe didn't come to Hawaii until about 1830, but it wasn't until 1870s that the lathe turned to calabashes. It coincided with an increasing scarcity of the ku or cow trees, which is the tree that was traditionally used as a Hawaiian calabash craftsman. They therefore sort of started turning them and started develop shapes and everything to suit what they were trying to do. The early calabashes, which there are still quite a lot around, are highly collectible, and they pay thousands of dollars for these things, and a lot of them are very badly cracked and distorted, and the price just goes up. The more they've been used, the higher the price is. So, you know, there's a big collector market out there for the old original ones. And the newer turned ones are now getting to be that way. What some of the people are doing with turning the calabashes is absolutely amazing. Some of the design elements, some of the kind of free thinking that's going on nowadays is taking this calabash form way past what anything was ever done traditionally. I think that's about it. Mainly decorative, but they could be used, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So, you know, it's something that's an ongoing thing, and I think it's valuable to us as turners in as much that it is an organic thing. We're not, you know, sitting with a piece of paper, putting measurements on things, and, you know, perfect proportions, and it has to look like this or do that. So there's a lot more kind of free thinking, and it's entirely up to the individual. Is once you've got the piece of wood on the lathe, do your own thing, and hey, see what happens. It's only wood, and it does grow on trees. If there's any questions while I'm rambling, please interrupt, you know. We got some samples here. These are mine. I don't know whose these belong to, but here's an interesting thing. I was talking about the calabashes getting beat up. You see, these are turned calabashes. But you see what the guy's done? He's put a butterfly repair in there, which is a really neat little element to add some salability to the bowl, all right? As you can see, These ones are pretty squat, and then this is a traditional one. It wasn't carved, it's an early turned one, but you see the height of it? Now, the other thing is, you have to question, they've all got round bottoms, not a square bottom in a place. All right? These two are well, I think actually that's only one, 2 pictures of one, that's another one I did. So I just, trying shapes and seeing what I can come up with. Again, here we're back into repairs. I know somebody that's just done this to a funeral urn. He's standing here in the room somewhere. This is a traditional, very traditional, early turned one. Again, nice flowing lines on it. And you'll notice that here, it just straightens out a little bit on each side, which has become the kind of norm for a calabash shape now, whereas some of these you see flare out a little bit at the top. These were done by Kelly Dunn, who's a really well-known turner in Hawaii right now, and knows a lot about calabashes. As you can see, there's a good variety there of heights, but basically the same round bottoms and the little parallel edges to the top. And this is a gorgeous piece, it really is. I have no idea who did it, but I really like that, the way the grain's been utilized and just the whole shape of the thing.
Do you know why they all have round bottoms?
Just hang in there. Okay, this is, I'm pretty certain this is a traditional carved one that somebody's got in a collection. It's pretty amazing. This one, and this one are all Richard Raffin works. You can see what he's done with them. There's some incredible imagination gone into. I don't think Richard even categorizes them as calabashes. He just says, hey, some little bowls that I did some fancy stuff to, But nevertheless, we got the round bottoms, and also on some of them, like this one and this one, they are coming in at the top and more or less going parallel again. So, but again, you can see how the shape and the form lends itself to all different sorts of treatments, and you can more or less have a complete palette of things that you can do with them. Okay, what materials? Any wood, preferably void-free. Wet or dry. Wet allows expiration of warping. Personally, I use wet. I don't really turn much of anything dry now unless I absolutely have to. Grain orientation, any way you choose. Try any of the artistic elements on it. Natural edges work really well, and you can do them any size you want, from little minute things to big huge ones. So lots of scope. Okay, the form, and this gets to Eugene's question. Traditionally, they were used as presentation, food presentation bowl. So the food was cooked, put in the bowls, and then set on either on the ground or on the banquet table. And to hold the bowls upright, they used a flower lei. You know what a lei is? A garland. They made little garlands of flowers that were sat on the table, and a bowl was set into them so it would stay upright. So, I think this lets you into another little kind of side shoot of making calabashes. There's no reason at all why you couldn't turn a little wooden ring, a loose wooden ring that fit the bottom of the bowl to make it sit up if you needed to. I got samples on the table here. As you can see, they're all standing up. They're not rolling around. They're pretty stable. So I really don't know if there's any necessity to have something to hold them up, Different densities within the wood sometimes will tilt them over one way or the other, but if you're going to use these, then you might need to make something that will hold them up. Generally, the opening at the top is always smaller than the biggest diameter, and like I said before, you get this straight graduation from the sides up to the top. thin-walled. Apparently, even the carved ones were never much thicker than 3/8 of an inch. Even huge, great big calabashes, like 18, 20-inch diameter, they were about 3/8 of an inch to half an inch thick. Very smooth curves and transitions. You don't want anything that like goes around in steps. So it's a good skill learning shape, because you learn to really get these curves to flow nicely, and it's all eye input. You know, you look at the thing, if it doesn't look right, you trim a bit more off and you make the curves flow. That's really what it's all about. Some little variations, these are all mine. Like I said, natural edge. I really think it works nicely, and I squeezed the top in a little bit smaller than would normally be. This one just has some pretty plain beads turned on it. This one, I was amazed. On the Antiques Roadshow last week, they had a couple of ceramic pots made in 1928, and they were decorated with the feather design of the southwestern Indians, and one of them was that exact shape. Now, I copied this off of one of Richard Raffin's, so he's obviously seen the ceramic ones as well.
That shape goes back to BC.
Yeah.
Not and in Europe as well. Molly Winton or somebody did one
Right.
that shape last year, and coincidentally there was an exhibit at the ROM.
Right.
I've kept it in my notes at home.
Yeah.
It's an unusual shape.
Yeah. No, I think this all goes back to the fact that the calabash itself has grown all over the world, and all of the artisans all over the world for generations and generations are used to these forms being around and have played with the shape. It's such a natural thing, you know. Both of these were treated with a verdigris finish, and you know, whether it works or not is entirely your opinion and my opinion. I quite like it. I wasn't that much overboard with it, but hey, you know, it was different. And again, these had some raised beads as against some kind of sunk beads like this one. So as you can see, I try. I did these quite recently. I got a big chunk of elm from a guy just up the road here, Dana. And it was only it was a big slab out of a tree. It was only 5 inches thick, and he was tossing it in the firewood pile, and it was soaking wet. And I said, give it to me, I'll take it out. No, tell like 7 inches thick, not 5. And so I cut it up into 7-inch cubes, and I'll get into that in a minute, why a cube. But these were all out of the same piece of wood that have been chopped into 7-inch cubes. So you can see that I'm experimenting here with vertical grain, side grains, etc., different shapes, different decorations, just having fun. And you know, like, that's what it's all about. I tacked this on today because I kind of wanted to go back on some of these. These three were the very first three I did in February 2008. The two natural edges I did later on that year, just so happened to have some black walnut that the bark would stay on. So I went back to the calabash and said, I like the shape, let me see what happens with natural edges, and that was the result. This one, I had some pieces of ailanthus, what's the real name? Tree of God, is it? Tree of Heaven, given to me. And this again was something different I tried. I took a regular carpenter's hand saw, and with the bowl spinning in the lathe, pushed the blade up against it so the teeth cut all these little grooves in and moved the saw backwards and forwards and really roughed up the surface, and then took a blowtorch to it and scorched it. And I quite like the effect on it. It's not something that I would do to everything, but I thought it kind of worked with that, give a little bit of variation in colors and different textures. The inside was absolutely smooth as a sheet of glass, and the outside was textured, but still showing the original grain inside and what the wood is. This one went down another road. I hadn't done any boxes for a long, long time, and piece of mahogany is about 250 years old, came out of a big 4-poster bed that I had given to me that had one post missing. And I kind of went to the calabash shape, and that was the result. I think it's the nicest box I've ever made, I really do. I don't know where the hell it is now, I have no idea, but it passed on very quickly.
Peter, if you say the calabash has to have a round bottom, you definitely went away on that one.
Exactly, yeah, no. Yeah, I took, like this is the thing, when you kind of get into the shapes of things, I think you know it's perfectly okay to modify to suit a purpose, and to have a box with a round bottom really wouldn't work. Okay, so I tried to make sure the curve was really tucked under, and there was this like fullness in the bottom, and then the long curve up to a parallel neck. And I really like the shape. In fact, I know somebody on WoW actually copied it, so I was very pleased about that. Very well-known box maker, actually, but we won't get into that right now.
MS?
Yes. Okay, I'm going to finish up with these two guys, one of which is on the table. This was a piece of elm that got identified as Kentucky coffee tree, and then went back to elm again. Big long story, won't get into it. Both of these were turned, this one was absolutely soaking wet, and I finished turned down to a 1/4 inch wall thickness on the whole thing, right the way through in one go. I think because it's thin, you lose a lot of the chances of it cracking. There was very little distortion on it. I don't have this one, it's boom, long gone. But when it had finished drying, and like I always when I turn something green, I got a little scale in the kitchen, and I constantly weigh them. Like every week I weigh them, and when the weight stays the same, I know it's dry. But the distortion on that, if I remember rightly, was less than 1/16 of an inch. So whatever the wood is, and I'm pretty certain it is elm, very, very stable, very little movement in it, and no problem at all. This one is Norway maple that came out of my neighbor's front yard, or backyard rather. The tree had been dead for like 5 years before it was cut. This was a piece out of the butt of the trunk, just above ground level. Soaking wet, really saturated, and I'll pass it around if you want it passed around. If not, you're welcome to take a look at it, but you can see it definitely went oval, all right? And again, this one is about 3/8 of an inch thick, and I just tarted it up a little bit by putting the burned line around on the top. So just to give you an idea of what I've done with them. You know, lots of new turners here tonight, and all I'm saying is, you know, like, don't get stuck in a mindset. Take something, play with it, have some fun. If it doesn't work, toss it in a firewood pile and start again and see what you can come up with. I'm very pleased with this particular bowl. This one is not for sale, it never will be for sale. The more I look at it, the more I like it. It's kind of growing on me more and more and more, and I don't want to get rid of it. Anything else, yeah, take it, but not that one. So it's here. If you want to come and handle it and pick it up, that's fine, okay? So that's about it for the presentation part of it, but thanks to Mike and the computer. We're now going to get on to the wood part. I'm going to be talking a little bit. Some of this is personal stuff, and so bear with me. About last March, I got to the point where I was going to give up turning. Been doing it since 2000 and getting nowhere. Or at least I didn't think I was getting anywhere. And I think a lot of people in this room have been down this same road, so this is nothing new. And I think you have to, be a bit realistic sometimes, and maybe my expectations of what I could do and what I thought was good weren't everybody else's expectations. So you kind of have to dodge the bullets once in a while, and I didn't know what to do or where to go. And started looking through my huge photograph inventory and went back to the Calabashes. I don't know why. There just seemed something there that kind of connected with me, and so I'm going to play with them and see what I can do with them. Kind of moved me forward, got me out of a slump, a real bad slump. And the reason I think why I personally went down there was I rubbed shoulders with a lot of people, talk a lot of turning, a lot of contact with other turners all over the world. And everybody wants to tell you stuff. Hey, you got to do it this way. You need one of these to do this. And I think I was just getting swamped, can't see the wood for the trees kind of thing. So, being a little bit of a cussed sort of person, I kind of stood back from it and almost said, screw you guys. I got to do something that's really something I want to do rather than just listening to what you guys are telling me. So this is why I went back to these calabashes. I like the shape of them. They were small or big or any size I wanted to be. Lots of potential there to play around with and have fun. So, how do you go about it? Well, I tell you what you do. It's going to cost you a fortune. Really pay attention to this bit. You go to the dollar store and you pick up one of these guys, a sketchbook. I was always a good drawer when I was a little kid, never touched it since. And I'm standing in the dollar store and I see these for $1.25, and I thought, gee, maybe I should give up the wood turning and pick up the pencil and see if I can go back to sketching. So I come home. What's the first thing I draw? Not a calabash. I'm going to leave this up here. You're welcome to thumb through this, okay? It's sitting over there on the table. Where did this come from? And I'm just trying to get you going down the road that my mind goes down. How many of you ever seen Stephen and Chris? Is it Stephen and Chris on the afternoon CBC, the designer guys? A couple of real fruits, but we won't go down there. In the back of their set, there is a big, long, modern-looking Danish kind of sideboard thing. And sitting on there, right out of focus, in the back of the set, are these two ceramic shapes. Exactly like that. Except the ceramic ones have a kind of a diamond incised pattern on them. And I thought, you know what, I really like the shape of that. So I sat there and in an afternoon doodled and filled in. There's all sorts of notes here. And I say, I'm going to leave this up here. You're welcome to come and take a look at it. Wrap some copper wire around the neck, all right? Make the copper wire a verdigris color, all right? What about making it as a box? With the copper wire, would it look African, Afro boxes? What else have we got? Turn it end grain. Use bland woods. Decorate it, burned or carved, textured with a texture wheel, question mark, because I didn't have one at the time. Got one now. Cross hatch with a texture wheel. This is all based on me looking at somebody else's shape, but where would I go with it? Never mind about what they did. I'm not interested in putting these diamond patterns on, all right? On the other side, I got indexed and cut with a grinder disc. I haven't done that yet. Series of small beads with a detail gouge. Haven't done that yet. Raffia instead of the copper wire. Haven't done that yet. Put a bead on the foot. I did that. Makes it look like a Chianti bottle. I wasn't that pleased with it, but I did do it. But a rust finish on it. How do I do a rust finish? So this is like an ongoing thing, just on this one shape. Like I said, $1.25 at the dollar store. Go there, get one, sit down with a pencil, take any shape that you like, and I mean like, have a passion for it, and see where you go with it, right? So that was one thing. The next thing I went on to was calabashes. I did this about 3 or 4 days later. So I sketched the calabash. I knew what it looked like. And now I put in some notes here just to keep this ticking over. Grain orientation, turn to exploit the grain to the best advantage. I'll talk about it in a minute. Turn green for distortion. I've already mentioned that. Decorate, question mark. Simple burn lines, textures, colors. This is all with the same shape. Again, I'm going to repeat myself what I just did for the last shape, but I think it's necessary to reinforce what you're thinking about as you're looking at things, to put it into perspective. On the next page is shape developments, make them longer, straighter sides, make an onion shape, which I'd already done with the natural edge ones. Reverse OG, which I've already done. Size, go big. Here you go. All right. I mean, this was done after this was written. Again, maintain the round bottom, which I do try to do. Investigate the grain orientations and green turn to finish for warp, thinner, better, question mark. Stability for use, turn rings or bracelets, which I've already talked about. Again, just ideas and a sketch. Next one, deep bowls. Has gone through the same process again on deep bowls, and also for a vase, and there's a vase sitting over there on the table I did. So you see how I'm kind of looking back at things that I've seen and not necessarily inspired by, but just stuff that I've seen, and something's registered up in here, and not a lot does very often, but sometimes things sink in and I'm going like, why did I like that? What was it about that thing that I saw that I liked? And so I've tried to sort of take the essence of it, draw the shape, say, okay, I like that, now where can I go with it? And so I'm already starting off, before I actually put anything on the lathe, I already am excited because I like this thing that I've seen, and where's it going to take me? I've made notes. The nice thing about these pads is you can tear the sheets off if you want to and just pin them up by the lathe, so you can sort of read your own thoughts as you're doing things. But you know, it helps. It gets you out of a rut. I'm not listening to what anybody else is telling me. I'm not listening to it, you've got to do this, it has to look like this or anything like that. This is all coming out of here. And you know, Mike was really nice to me tonight, and he said, you know, I come up with some unbelievable things. No, we don't. This is like, there's a lot of brain work gone into these things, and I don't know any other way of doing it. Now, some of you people might be blessed with a lot of talent. I'm not. I have to go through things in a certain way to come to an end, to know that, yeah, okay, I liked doing that, and now it's done. I'm going to put it on the shelf or sell it or whatever, give it away. But because of the satisfaction I've got from the process and the end result, I'll go back to it later on and maybe go off on a different tangent. So I'm building up a repertoire of stuff that I like to do, and none of it is going to be the same. And that's what really appeals to me, that I'm not stuck doing bowl after bowl after bowl, same old shapes, bit of decoration, bit of color on, flat bottom, da-da-da, whatever, get it out, you know. That isn't what turning's all about as far as I'm concerned. I really do it because I love doing it. And this is helping me no end. I'm so fired up now with doing turning, as against almost a year ago I was on the verge of walking away from it. So the next thing I went on to was different boxes. So I've already started this page, and the last thing on here says egg with a question mark. All right? Well, flip the page over and I've got written, and you've all seen this, it was in a contest last summer. Large egg, built-in tray and a ring holder, decorate, textures, colors, lamination, patterns in lamination. So that's the road that led me to produce the egg that I put in the contest last summer. So I think my journey as such has been a good one so far, and I'm just hoping it's, going to carry on down that road. So I really do encourage you all, try it. You got nothing to lose. If it helps you, great. If not, well, hey, find your own thing, and don't be ashamed to try and, find out what you want to do. Okay, enough of the propaganda. How many times have you heard people say, well, it was in the wood. I turned this and look at this and nature does all the design work. I just find it. Hogwash. Most of it is 99% pure accident. You pick up a chunk of wood, you happen to turn it the right shape that shows something in the wood that you couldn't see that was there before. That's what I think anyway. No doubt there's going to be people here that disagree with that, but that's fine. It's something I've never been able to do. I've had some luck. Mike gave me a piece of cherry a while back there, and I kind of looked at it and said, yeah, this has to be a satin ring ball. Boom, and did it, and it worked. And whoa, surprise, but I had no idea that it was going to look like that even halfway through turning it. So sometimes you do get surprised, but I think you'll need to try and develop a way of doing things that takes a lot of that surprise element out. How many pieces of wood have you put on a lathe, turned the crappiest looking piece of junk out of, tossed away, and when there could be an absolute gem if you'd have gone about it a different way. So, I think if you're going to progress as a turner, not only is using the tools correctly and doing the right job with that particular tool very important, also having some, method or train of thought or direction that's going to put you through the process in the easiest possible way to get you some good results. So I talked earlier about cubes of wood. Yeah, I know. You got a nice big round log. Why the hell would you cut it square? Okay. Good question. Why would you? I don't know. Just seemed logical to me because as a square piece of wood, you've got 6 sides. All right? Or a cube, rather. You've got 6 sides. All roughly the same size. So number one, it's going to be not bad for balance. If you mount it up in the center, it's going to be reasonably balanced. So it takes out a lot of the danger out of it. Instead of having a round piece of wood that could be all wobbly and horrible and lumps of bark flying off and all the rest of the terrible things. Number two, this is, Andy will tell you. How wet is it, Andy? It's wet, right?
Very wet.
Yeah. This is elm. Actually, it's elm coffee tree wood. Harvested on West Pole. How long ago, Paul? Last June?
Last summer, yeah.
Last summer.
He's on the table here.
Okay. So, it's had no chance to dry out. The end grain was coated up with wax almost instantly.
When was that cut?
Sorry?
When was that cut to that shape?
When was this cut to this shape? Last Monday. All right. I processed the whole log into six cubes.
In the spring, but I didn't get the wood till
Right.
middle or late summer.
Yeah. So now this is all relevant information because one of the big things about being a wood turner is how do you dry the wood? How do you turn wet wood? How do you overcome the problem with cracks? And I've just thrown all of that aside. I don't bother with it anymore because what I'm finding is turn thin, turn wet, finish the damn thing as you go, and let it dry. And you know what? I have maybe a 1% failure rate with cracks. Doing the other way of rough turning something, putting it in a drying position, in a well-ventilated area, where the relative humidity is always this, yada, 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 and on and on and on, failure rate about 25%. And 9 times out of 10, when I go back to that dried, horrible piece of junk, the shape I want out of it is unobtainable because it's warped, cracked, split, whatever. So you have to settle for second best. Here you got a wet piece of wood, it's a cube, it's a blank canvas, you do what you want to do with it. All right, let's talk about some wood basics now. As a tree, it has growth rings, annual rings as we call them in Britain, but growth rings on the end grain of the log. Wood always shrinks the maximum amount around the annual ring. It's very important. You have to really think about that. So this piece is a quarter segment roughly, so the maximum shrinkage in this piece of wood will be around that ring. So if this was left, what would happen is this would go to a diamond shape in cross section looking at the end grain. So that's where all of the stresses are built up when it's drying, and you get some idea of how predictable the shape will be if you turn it wet and let it distort. So if you don't want it to distort, then you pick a piece of wood where the rings are perfectly concentric, which means having the pith in the middle. All right? Never turn a piece of wood with a pith in the middle. How many times you heard that? Cut the pith out no matter what. Okay, fine. Whatever cranks you up. Nothing wrong with pith if you turn it end grain, because the pith is at the center. So it might get a few radial cracks because of the stresses in the wood, but soak the pith down with some CA glue as you turn. Make sure it is constantly got CA glue on the pith. You'll find the pith will stay pretty damn stable and it won't crack. The other thing is, I just said it, always turn with the pith in the bottom, in the end grain, like turn end grain with the pith in the center. So please explain this one to me. Pith is in the side, pith is in the side. Was it a disaster? Well, yeah, look at the shape it went. Did I know that? Yes, I did.
Pull it back behind the light.
Sorry. I'll pass these around. All right? Predictable. All because I started with a cube. I picked the cube up and I saw, okay, this is more or less out the center of the log. It's got the pith in it. Sorry, wrong way up. That way up. Got the pith in it. So how am I going to turn it? Well, you know, if I turn it that way, yeah, the pith is going to be in the side grain. Ooh, that's a no-no. Let's do it that way. What's going to happen to it? Well, it's going to shrink, maximum shrinkage around the rings. And if you look at this, you can see that's actually what happened. I didn't anticipate it being so dramatic. I did anticipate it going into roughly a square shape, and square bowls is something that's still on the back burner for me. It's something I thought about a long time ago. I've tried it a couple of times, and I still want to go down that road. I think it would be nice to turn a perfectly square bowl. All right? There's a way. Trust me on this, there is a way. All right? But again, if I hadn't started off with a cube, that would have been an opportunity gone. I would have never seen that in the log. I really wouldn't. It wasn't until the cube shows you where the rings are, where the grain patterns are, where the pith is, that you can then say, well, that's the piece I need to make something like that. This is olive, Russian olive. This is still soaking wet, okay? This was a cube. I looked at it. I loved this black stripe in it, so I said, I really want that to show on the side. And I think it would look nice with a heavy contrast of heavy grain on one side and light grain on the other. So I made the decision to turn it end grain. Now, because it's been turned end grain, this was done, what's today, Thursday? This was done on Tuesday. This was done, this one was done 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and it's bone dry, okay? It's put in the microwave, but we'll get back to that. Yeah, so, I'll pass this around, you can feel it's wet. So how do I go about this? Well, basically, spin it on the lathe, cut it to the shape I want, take it down to the thickness I want. This one's probably just a bit more than 1/8 of an inch. But then comes the important process. I don't want this to distort. So turning it end grain helps me in as much that remember I said it shrinks around the rings, so all the rings are pulling uniformly, so the shape should maintain pretty damn accurately, all right? Yes, there's a little bit of difference here in the fact that one side is sapwood and the other is heartwood, so the worst it's going to do is maybe go a little oval, which to me is acceptable. I have no complaints about that, but I want it to slow dry. So, what are the alternatives? Well, I could just take it off the lathe and throw it in a paper bag like everybody else does that wants to slow down the drying, and come back to it in a week or so and hope to hell it was still in one piece. Or, maybe if I'm going to finish this piece, maybe I should finish sand it. So what my normal procedure is now, I use dry sandpaper on the piece at very high speed, 2,500 RPM, handheld, none of this orbital drill stuff. I get my cuts as clean as I can, and then I hand sand, normally starting at about 150, 180 grit, and take it down to 400. Then, while it's still on the lathe, I apply a 50-50 mix of boiled linseed oil and turpentine. And I only use turpentine because, I don't know, I guess a nature freak. I just think it's purer than using Varsol or any of that junk. Turpentine comes from a tree. So yeah, use something that comes from a tree. So 50-50 mix of boiled linseed oil and turpentine, and I absolutely saturate it. Pump it on with a brush. It's dripping. Look at the front of me, all right? And I turn the lathe by hand while I'm doing it, and then spend about 15 minutes slowly rotating it by hand just to keep the oil soaking in evenly all the way around. Then I leave it for about half an hour, come back, crank the lathe up, and take all the excess oil off with a dry paper towel. Then I use 240 grit automotive paper and the same mix of boiled linseed oil and Varsol to do a final sanding on it, all right? So you end up with a pretty smooth finish. No rocket science there, it works, you know? Then it's just put up on a shelf and left to dry. End of story. If I want to put any more finish on it, this one was done exactly the same process. This was done yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock. It was soaked in boiled linseed oil, and sanded, and I put it in a microwave at power level 7 for 2 minutes, and stopped it every 30 seconds to check on how hot it was getting. After a minute, I couldn't touch it. It was that hot. It was way, way too hot. So I let it cool down, and then I did it for 30 seconds, another 30 seconds or 2 minutes, pulled it out, let it cool right off again. It was steaming like crazy, and it already started to distort quite a bit, so I was kind of pleased with that. Once it had cooled off, I put it back in the microwave, did the same process again, let it cool off, did another session in the microwave, and by that time it was as dry as it was going to be. I mean, it's pretty thin. It's maybe just about 1/8 of an inch. And it also distorted like crazy. So there I am. I've got this finished thing. Now I want to put some more finish on it. What do? Well, I take the same automotive paper, and because it's wet and dry paper, it doesn't really get clogged up with any residue of the oil or anything like that. I just did a very light hand sand on it, and then I used from John at Woodchuckers the general salad bowl finish, and I just brushed a heavy coat of that on, let it sit for 10 minutes, wiped off the excess. So it's had one coat, and it's starting to get a little bit of a sheen on it. It's not a lot, but there's a little bit there. So I'll probably give it another 2 coats like that before I'm finished, and then maybe finally buff it up with a soft buff on the lathe. That'll be it. It's done, and some wax on it. But, so you're seeing these in the process of making. So I'm going to pass these around, all right, so you can get a close-up look at them. I forgot I was hooked up.
Your car around the wheel.
Almost a disaster. Am I still live? Yeah. Okay. Back to the beginnings. Not much to say about this one. Piece of black walnut. Had some, actually it was a piece of crotch black walnut. Had some nice flame in it. Again, it was cut into a cube first. Some nice flame in it and this nice bark streak. So it was turned intentionally end grain to kind of show the features as much as possible. Nice round bottom on it. No signs at all of any way that it was mounted, which is very important, I think, in all turn-ins. I stopped putting feet on things probably 2 years ago. I really didn't see the need for them. The only thing I can really say about putting a foot on something is you can put a recess in the bottom so you got somewhere to sign. If you notice, there's no signatures on these. So it's kind of difficult to sign them. I don't know. I'm just a round bottom man, I guess. What else can I say, you know? How are we doing for break? Getting close. So we start off with a cube, and once I've decided which way around, I'm going to turn it by the grain and where the rings are in the end. Mount it up between centers, and the first thing I do is turn a tenon on the bottom to go into a chuck. Why a tenon? I've never been very happy doing recesses in blanks to hold with a chuck. I don't know, it just didn't seem right to me. But I have done it. And yeah, it's nice because with that recess there, if you want to afterwards dress it up a little bit and sign, it's already there. You know, you don't have to have this lump on the bottom that's supposed to be a foot and then make it hollow again. It's already there. It's hollow. You can put a ring in it. Whatever. When it comes to these guys, you've got a problem. And it's all about visualization. When you take a cube and you're going to make it round, you've got to have some idea of how the round is going to fit into the cube. All right? So, you want to put a tenon on this, you've now got to have the ability to visualize what's going to happen when you hollow this thing out. Oh, it's all beautiful on the inside. Then you've got to take the tenon off, and guess what? You know, you just made a mint with a hole. I mean, it's just a funnel. You haven't left enough room. So that is very critical. So, okay, then what happens if I put a recess in there already? I had a recess in, so I knew where the bottom of the bowl was going to be. Well, then what you've got to find is you've now got to remove all of this wood around the outside to get rid of the recess, which is a little bit trickier. It really is. And the only reason I know that is this guy. It's got a flat bottom. I ran out of wood. Didn't visualize it correctly. And I know if I'd had a tenon on there, I would have had enough to get what I wanted out of it. And how thin is this right here? I don't know whether it shows in the light or not.
You can see through it, yeah.
Okay. Paul's laughing. He's known I've done a few of these guys. I haven't yet had a hole in the bottom, not a big hole. I got pretty damn close a couple of times, but this is, I think, the third one that I've done using a recess in the bottom to take the chuck jaws. And all three I had the same problem with. So you know what? I don't do it like that anymore. So that one's got a flat on it, okay? When do you want to take a break?
It's 8:30.
Is it? Holy cow. I need an hour to make one of these into a...
You know what, most of the focus is on the outside shape. You could do the outside and part of the,
Okay, so you want to take a break now?
I think probably, and then let you go on one run.
Okay.
Yeah, show us how we've got the 5
All right.
memberships, so.
Okay, well, that's end of part one. Come back after the commercials.
Take 15 minutes.
15 input from other people. I was, to put it into context, talking about looking at shapes, how to develop something on your
See
own.
light up, I can't see your lips.
How's that?
No, just put the light.
No, I don't want to move it because of the camera. Not referring to how to use particular tools in particular situations. Anybody that's starting turning, I think the basic need is get help learning how to use your tools properly, effectively, and most importantly, safely. Okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you. So I guess I should do the Norm Abrams now. Above all, wear safety glasses, whatever.
And a face shield.
Whether you actually sit on my head is another matter, but it's there. Okay. Moving right along. I looked at this piece of wood and I decided that it's almost got pith in one corner here, right there. So I think this piece will kind of distort kind of nice. It's got the rings showing here, so it's going to shrink in this direction. So hopefully it will shrink out around like so. All right, going more oval on the top. That's if I don't know. That's if I turn it long grain. Turn it across the grain, then we're into a whole different thing. Because the grain is going pretty equally there, but it's coming through this way, it's now going to tend to kind of flatten the shape down and go more oblong, again into an oval, but in a different direction. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen the other, and I think for maybe ease of use, I'm going to, as I've got to do a quickie, turn it end grain, all right? So let's just find the center. I'm getting really technical here. Normally I just eyeball it, but when you're using a spur center, you can bang the spur center into the block of wood with a mallet and then put the spur center into the lathe. I personally don't like pounding the wood on the spur center when it's in the spindle of the lathe. I really don't think that's a smart idea. Instead, I prefer a very gentle approach of slowly cranking the tailstock up to pressure, rocking by hand, and getting the spurs to bite in so it's nice and firm, and there it is. Make sure everything's clear. Okay, I think we got to go. Now we might have problems. Can you still hear me? Yeah? Okay. So, using a 5/8 of an inch Benjamin's Best bowl gouge, courtesy of John from Woodchuckers, $27. Got to get the commercials in, sorry. High speed steel. The thing with the back of the gouge on there is just to see if there's any flat spots, and that sounds pretty good, so I'm thinking it's totally round. Yeah. This is what's commonly called a bidan. I just started using this, and I find it very handy for putting tenons on because it's 3/8 of an inch wide, so you know the tenon's about the right length. I'm using it bevel up, which looks like a suicide mission. So far I've not had any problems, but hey, who knows? And this is just a matter of, there's the tenon, all right? Let's just check the size. A little bit big. Whew. Definitely piss elm. Definitely. Whew. I'm just using the calipers to make sure it will fit in the chuck, that's all. Somewhere there's a knockout bar. That's not it. That worked. I could have used the chuck with a screw center in it, but I tend to always start everything between center, no matter what. If I'm doing a straight bowl, anything else, I tend to use these guys between centers because it gives you a bit of a chance to orient grain one way or the other without it being in a fixed position, so you can make other decisions if you have to. And also, I think the safest thing on a lathe is between centers. Do away with one center, you have 50% chance something's going to go wrong again. So I always tend to start between centers, even big out of balance stuff. If the lathe will swing it, goes between centers until it's in balance, then I'll switch over to a chuck. But that's the way I always work. Others might do it differently, that's fine. Just because I say, you don't have to believe it.
Peter, you have a generator at home?
Nope, thanks. Wouldn't want one.
What do you have?
A 1962 Rockwell Delta cast iron oldie with a 1-horse motor with electronic variable speed drive on it, and to be honest, it's done everything I've ever needed. Nice piece of old iron, and you can still pick them up at a reasonable price. Okay, that one looks good. It's just, I'm using the tailstock to try and make sure everything's staying on center here. As soon as it's nice and tight. Is that a good one-handed tight? First thing I'm going to do is bore a depth hole. Now then, we go back to this visualization of where the curve's going to come. I want the curve to kind of finish here on this shoulder line. So my depth hole will be, about 1/4 inch back, which is kind of nice, right to the mark on the drill bit. Gee, looks like I know what I'm doing, right? I never ever use Forstner bits into end grain. They're not meant to use that way. This is just a regular 3/8 of an inch Morse bit, at least British name Morse bit. I don't know what you guys call them, twist drills, that I've ground a spur end on, so it's a little point with 2 spurs on. A back point. Hey, thank you. Canadian terminology. Get the hole started. Drill press. It is so damn hot behind this bloody visor thing, it's unreal. Need some air conditioning. Okay, so now I'm going to do some shaping. I could have left it between the centers and shaped, but I want to try and push, excuse me, as far forward as I can, so I'm kind of cutting some corners here. Okay. I'm doing the top shape first, and this is just a very rough cut. I'm not being that precise about it. And what I'm cutting, I'm looking at the shape that's developing over here. I'm not looking at the tool. Long gouge. Now for the bottom. Whoops. That's something you don't want to do unless you want to get on the grinder. Okay. I need to tuck that in just that little bit more. I'm trying to refine the shape as I go because I really don't want to do any sanding, so A few light cuts now at this stage of the game is definitely preferable. There's a blending process into the reverse curve. Got the bevel running really nicely, just a very light touch. Need to straighten that top edge up a little bit more. Well, that's not bad, no major tear out. It's not exactly smooth as a baby's bum, but it's not bad. So, that's the outside profile. Now then, we come to the interesting bit, because I'm just going to go, let's just set this up over to the paper here. We've got, whoop, mic's gone. That's better. This is where it gets a little bit complicated. You have a straight shoulder to a curve to a round, okay? You got a straight, I know this is ass backwards, but bear with me. You got a straight gouge coming in here, no matter how you look at it, and when you get over here, you got to be able to swing that gouge around to cut this curve. So, the smaller you make that top, the more problems you got, because you're going to get to a point where you just won't be able to reach. Okay? So, the basic calabash shape that everybody seems to go for is a wide opening. Now, you saw when I showed the various samples that some of the ones I did are very onion shaped like this, you know. Whoops, round bottom, no flats. To get a gouge in there is absolutely physically impossible to maintain a wall thickness. So what do you do? Well, you know, you can go out and you can make all sorts of fancy hollowing tools or whatever, but Mr. One Way makes this guy. So termite has a ring cutter that goes in the end. Cutters come in 3 different sizes. I get through these quite a lot. Do have a tendency to break them when I'm all hot and bothered and really cranked up and getting a little bit aggressive. These are a forged bit. No, tell a lie, these aren't a forged bit. These are a cast bit, so they're not as strong as a forged bit would be. You get a sharpening stone or a rig to fit into a router to sharpen. You can't sharpen these with anything but a router. You have to have the high speed, at least 20,000 RPM, with a little sharpening stone that you use to sharpen these guys up. So basically it's a ring tool. It just fits in like so. It has a dual bevel on it. There's a very short bevel on the one side and a longer bevel on the other. This means you can take a fine or a coarse cut with it. Can you get that all right, Peggy? Okay, depending which way you round it, which way you turn it around. Now, the beauty of this is that if I had the Allen wrench, let me just drop that in there and tighten it up. It gives you an offset cutting edge. If you use the biggest diameter bit, this is the 1/2 inch one, it means you're getting another 1/4 inch or so off to one side, which means going back to here, you got that extra little bit that you can tend to get in around these corners. And 9 times out of 10, that's all I ever really need. This is my at the moment, numero uno hollowing tool. I use nothing else, exclusively termite bits. I've got a homemade termite holder that's 3 feet long and 3/4 inch bar for long hollowing. But for end grain hollowing, it's the greatest thing, I think. Takes a little while to get used to. I also use it for side grain hollowing, which it's a no-no. We're going back to don't listen to what people tell you, try things out for yourself. But it does work very well on side grain hollowing. So just another tool for the arsenal. I think these are about $75 with one bit, and the extra bits I think are $24 each from one way. So good tool to have in your arsenal. I like them. Anyway, where were we? Okay, I'm just going to true up this face a little bit. Now, here's something, can you get on the overhead there, Peggy? I don't know if you can see this or not. Okay, yeah, it's a good shot. When you're using a gouge, I mean, okay, this gouge has got a long grind or an Irish grind or whatever you want to call it. But when you're taking a cut across the grain like this, make sure that the bevel of your tool is perfectly parallel to the face of the wood, otherwise it's going to skid off. Start it off, and a push cut. You can also pull as well, do the same thing. Okay, let's do some hollowing. I'm using a pull cut because I'm pulling up the grain. I'm not going against it, I'm going with the grain, so I'm pulling towards the outside. And what I'll do is I'll open up a hole to almost the finished thickness I want. Now what I'm doing here is I'm using the back of my hand as a fulcrum point for the point of the tool, so I'm actually cutting in a curve. I'm swinging an arc like this. I now want to address this first part to make a parallel side. So I pull the tool over again, make sure the bevel is parallel with the face. And cut the wall. And it's all about the line of sight. I know where the bevel is, I'm looking at it, and I know where the outside of the wall is. So I can guide the gouge to keep this 1/8 of a way from the outside all the way around. So I'm now going to take a bit more out.
Why don't you use a ring tool for that?
No, it's not as fast. Ring tool I find is really good when you've hogged out most of the stuff with a gouge. Then you go in with a ring tool and you really touch up and do some gentle cuts and smooth everything out, blend everything together. Now at this stage it's really nice to have an airline to blow all the crap out. But hey, in a perfect world, so I'm now going back in again with a push cut straight down the side, lining up the bevel. And I adjust how much, or rather, I adjust the aggressiveness of the cut by rolling the gouge. So I can put more open cut, which will take off a lot more material, or if I roll this over so it's really closed, all I'm really doing is a scraping cut, which is kind of a lot more finer and nowhere near as aggressive. I really don't want to burst through the wall right now, so I'm taking it quite easy. Calipers. Everybody's born with a pair, all right? Yeah, that's pretty good. Again, this is this circular cut from the center up to the outside. And I have no idea what's happening here. I can't see, right? I mean, the wood's in the way. But I'll get to a point where I'm no longer comfortable with how much overhang I got in the tool. I mean, this is the 5/8. Overhang on the tool there is about 3 inches. I wouldn't go much deeper than that without making some adjustments. So, how do you adjust it? Well, this tool rest is a pain. Sorry, Malcolm. But, well, I don't have an alternative. That's the trouble. All right? No, it's not that. It's like, I'm used to using a round bar, and you get a lot more clearance under a round bar than you do with this, but that's okay. That's not bad. It's better than I thought it would be, actually. Apologies. Make sure there's nothing hidden. Okay, let's introduce some more commercials here. I can't see what the hell's going on inside, so I need some light. $25 from IKEA, flexible head, LED, whatever, clamp on the thing. Let's put some illumination in there. There we go. Now I can see. Mind you, my hand's probably going to get in the way, but... I'm sorry, I've got to take that. The sweat level's getting too high. So, I'm just clearing the shavings by driving up. Sorry. Oh man. I'm just clearing the shavings out by dragging the back of the bevel back down the wood. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad at all.
Can I ask, Bruce Campbell was talking about the idea that when you follow it, he turns the lathe in reverse so he can watch the cuts without having to bend into the lathe.
Sure.
Have you tried that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Works for me fine, but point is, if you haven't got a lathe with reverse, it's of no use to you at all, you know. So I didn't want to get into that. You know, most people who are starting out turning, they're into, you know, the jet mini lathes and everything, which don't have. The whole idea of when George asked me about doing this demo, he was on about, you know, like push the boundaries a little bit for people that are wanting to progress, you know. So I figure, well, okay, but thank you for bringing it up. You know, yes, if you got reverse, you can reverse turn. and which means you can see the other side without cranking over and looking down the hole and all the rest of the uncomfortable things and putting your back out, ending up, you know. And I do it quite often, but most of my hollowing is done out on the end now. I very rarely hollow between centers. I always go outboard, and I'm a lot more comfortable outboard. But that's my rig, my setup, my lathe. Can't do it there. Vacuum pump. So.
You can also stand on this side of the lathe.
Yeah, you can. Oh yeah, you can look at my rear end all night. I'd be more than happy, you know. Okay. Mike tells me 10 minutes, so I'm not chickening out on you or anything like that. I really am not, but we are pressed for time. I still got a good half-inch to go in there, and I'm not going to go any further, but you get the picture. I want to move on to, okay, so there you are. You're all nicely hollowed out. You sanded everything, and at this point, I would sand inside, outside, put the oil on, saturate it, really soak it up with oil, still on the lathe, and gives you the ability to spin the lathe by hand and just apply oil to your heart's content. So bear with me, we've come this far, all right? Next step is, how the hell do we get rid of the tenon, okay?
Can I ask you a question? You said before you hand sand only. Why not power sand?
You know what? Have you tried power sanding with oil?
Okay.
I mean, look, it's bad enough hand sanding, trust me, you know? I mean, I spent 2 hours cleaning the front of this today, you know, I mean, I'm not trying to put people off. I enjoy sanding with oil, I really do. I'm kind of kinky that way, but no, you know, it's a good point though. Okay, so we got this little guy, and now we've got to take this big nubbly bit off the end. I bet I don't have one to fit. I knew it. Damn. It's neither one nor the other. I'm going to go with this one. I make these up. Plywood, faceplate, that actually screws on my lathe. I got a tap, a 1-inch 8 tap from the hardware store. I make up wooden faceplates with this big plywood boss on it that can also be gripped in the jaws of the chuck if you need to. So now I don't know how accurate this is going to be, but it should spin pretty good. Not bad. Okay. So now we've got to do something about turning a groove in this piece of wood. I did mention it to some people during break. You've now I mean, that's about 1/8 of an inch. The last thing you want to do now is put any stress internal, because it's going to crack. So the only way you can hold this really well is to turn a groove that is a snug fit on the outside, not on the inside. If it's really snug on the outside, it's compressing everything and you're not going to get it to crack, all right? So that's where I'm going now. How much longer have I got, Mike?
7 minutes.
Oh, man. This piece in the middle here is like really old dry apple, and it's only glued in there with some thick CA glue, so it might fling out. Just like that. Now I'm in real problem now. Don't have enough wood left. No. Okay.
Okay, Peter. Okay, you jam it in there, and then at the end Oh, you finished it?
6 minutes. What are we doing? Counting down? This is like NASA. The pieces of wood I've got on here are just rotten old pieces of pine. I've got a local lumberyard in Welland that sells, they call it crating pine. It's 1x12 rough sawn, and they charge 80 cents a lineal foot for it. And I just go in there and buy 6 or 8 feet and use it for little things like this. Okay. I use a pair of these straight dividers for sizing thing up. And I set these to the outside diameter. These are bow springs, so they're pretty sturdy. If I screwed it the right way, it might work better. Well, I'm going to take a diameter a little bit smaller than what I want. It's about a 32nd. I use a tool rest. And what I'm doing is I'm putting one point of the divider in that makes a mark, and then I can see how it is in relation to the other. It needs to come in a little bit. There, so that's the size I need, is right there, marked. 1/8 parting tool. Now that's the outside diameter. I'm going to cut just a fraction on the inside of that. Now if I was really brave, I'd just jam it in there with it, and we'll turn in a little bit more. This is where you get totally pissed off when you make it too big. A little bit more. I can see it's a pretty tedious process, but I don't know any way to make it any quicker. Bigger hammer would do it, definitely. we go. All right, let me get this thing out of the way.
5 minutes?
Sorry?
You want to buy 5 minutes? You got 5 minutes, Grace.
Okay, thank you. Put the tailstock center back in and it's lined up good, so I'm just going to put some pressure on that. I'm going to back off the speed just a little bit. Look at that, it's running perfect. Whoa. Sometimes they don't. That's a texture experiment. And now we can round off the bottom. It's amazing how small a nub you need there just to provide support. Once I get down that far, I finish with a dreaded skew. Mustn't use a skew on a bowl, okay? And I always back the center off so it's not quite touching. Skew, point, long point down, bevel rubs first, okay? So there's the bevel rubbing, and I just bring it in and I arc it down. And then take a V cut, arc it down. Bevel rub, arc. V cut, bevel rub, V cut, bevel rub, V cut. We're almost there. You're going to see this little bit just stop turning. There it is. Scary stuff, eh?
At this stage, is the bowl soaking wet with oil outside?
Yeah. Once I get to there, final sand, oil, wet sand with oil, and take it out, and there it is. One calabash.